Okay, we are back. Today it's going to be Neo's public-private coaching on 9max sit and goes. And I'm Aarnimetsa from pokerarmenia.com. You are watching our live stream. And I'm wondering, is Neo still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So we have been going through some of Neo's hands here. And there was one question that you had on this 10-8 suited hand.
Yeah, if it would be a profitable raise call versus a small blind, or if it would be, if it would be the better option than to shove it. I mean, shove is obviously not so good.
I think that this is a spot that we can't get enough increased fold equity either way. And this is probably a spot where we are getting probably about the equal amount of fold equity against the offsin guy. And this is mostly a problem of course it's going to be close. It's going to be close, and this was mainly about the difference in about thinking how that does the smallest stack here affect. I don't think that it's going to be profitable either way. 10-9 suited would be profitable, either as a shove or a min raise.
Mm-hmm.
I'm even unsure that which way it's more profitable. So it's like, I think in this case, like for the 10-8 suited, the biggest drag to it being a push would be the small blind. If the small blind is a nit and we would expect like he's folding 70%, it's going to be a good shove or it's going to be a good raise. But if he's calling close to 100%, then it doesn't matter what we do, or what the button does, or what the big blind does. And in a vacuum, min raising could look really trappy for the button. So it's a spot that probably min raising could be a bit better even in here. And we could do an exploitative raise fold against a tight button here. Okay. So now we are going to discuss more about Neo's questions here. So at first, it's interesting in a way, because the first question is about problem with dealing with opponents' min raises correctly. In spots where opponents should only have a shoving range, how should we adjust our ranges in these spots? Like if we are thinking about total resources calculator and doing a range in these situations, it will always assume a polarized range. And do opponents min raise crappy hands often enough when they are so short? And there was an example. So if NXP Ninja is still online, this is going to be a question for you. Like we are having NXP Ninja here. Big blind is 80 chips. We are having one guy with 500 chips. So it's like 6 big blinds. One guy with 720 big blind, 720 chips. So it's about 9 big blinds. And then we are having the biggest stack with 8 big blind with 8 big blinds. What does a reg raise here? Min raise here? Should we think that the reg would be min raise folding this against us? Now I believe that we have lost Germany.
No, I'm still here. It was a question for me.
Yeah.
Okay. From my own feeling, I think that his range, I mean, I don't think we have much fold equity, but there could still be. I mean, I still have seen people raise fold here. And from my range adjustment, personally, I think I should tighten my range, but I'm never sure how much. And I mean, compared to if he would shove here, but I'm never sure how much I should tighten my range and how much is too much.
This is an interesting spot because if we would have like a holder resources calculator, if we would have a polarized range here and there would be like crappy hands in the, I think that the polarized range should be polarized widely enough that we should have a way bigger 3-betting range here than calling a shove range. And I don't believe that that's correct in real life, which you pointed out as well.
Yep.
I would
Yep.
I would probably go here pretty close to, like, if this is the first hand, I would go slightly tighter than calling a shove here. But after I would have seen this a couple of times, I would then start to loosen up and go for a more loose, because if they are doing this regularly, it's likely that they are going to have, and this is a really nasty spot with something like pocket fives. If we are having something like Jack 10 suited here, it would be so much better because then we would have more options to go for a flat call here as well. But with something like pocket fives, it's pretty much that we want to either shove or fold in here.
Yeah, I think one problem I have with the ranges here is that, as I said, he should shove a lot of hands. So that leaves kind of the question how his range really looks. Because, I mean, if I assume that I go a bit tighter than the Nash calling range here, is this really tight enough? Because, I mean, because he should shove most hands, there isn't that much left. I mean,
I think the problem or the opportunity in there is that if you are going slightly tighter than Nash call range, then you will see your opponent's hand here. And if you are having these kind of situations that if you have seen it 3 times and 3 out of 3, it has been pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens, ace king suited or something like that, then you'll know that you need to tighten up a lot because it's going to only be trapped there. But like in general, I think that people are going to be, when people are min raising, they are going to be doing it with a really good hand too often. That might also be why the min raises are going to work so well, because people are going to expect that when people are min raising, they are going to trap a lot. And Callan says that flat calling with small blind this short, I would question if it really makes sense. I think that this is a spot where we would have quite a good stack size for a stop and go as well, and trying to increase our fold equity that way. Like if we are having a situation here that, well, or we would have an opponent here that is going to min raise with other hands than only traps here, going for a stop and go here isn't going to be the stupidest of things. That I think that there will be parts of our range that stop and go will make a lot of sense. And yes, Kaleon said that win racing from UTG with 4 big blind stack must be aces. I think that we have, like, there are also more questions on Neo about the other positions as well.
Yeah,
But
and one example is when for example, when I'm really short and bigger stacks min raise into me, what I should think about that. I'm never sure what I think of their range in that spot, and if I should adjust or do anything different.
like, also in this case, one option is, like, if it would be that NXP Ninja would have your stack size here and you would have his stack size, then this would be more clear cut, and I think then the player types are going to be more polarized. There are going to be players that are raising only nuts, and then there are going to be players that are min raising a polarized range here. But when the stack size are this way around, there will be the third player type as well. Player type that's playing too many tables to not being quick enough to read the other player's stack size and min raising because he's having a big stack size here and not checking the effective stack size in this spot. And then I would think that with that min raise would have a lot more probability of being a polarized one, and because he's having the bigger stack, I'm thinking that that increases his possibility of not only having a trap here, like that increases the probability that he's going to have a polarized range here, in my opinion, because he's having the big stack, because then there will also be the option that he just didn't look the effective stack sizes. Of course, NXP Ninja can tell himself because he's at the top in our chat, so he can explain what he's thinking about here if he still remembers. And Kauris says that Big Blind will never not fold this. I think that Big Blind will fold this part of the time. This isn't the sweet spot for him to call. And now it's going to be a question on that, is this a chat bluff? That does NXP Ninja really have a lot of chunk here? But I must say that I laughed out a bit when I saw that Neo sent me the one example, and he was against one of our forum members there.
Yeah, it was the only one I could find. I mean, I always say there are so many spots where they min raise and so often, and then I tried to find one example, and it took me like forever to find one. I remembered his name, so that was easier to find.
But then it's going to be also like you can do a filter. I don't know if you can save quick filter on Hold'em Manager easily.
Yeah, you can.
It's like, do a filter, see other regs, see what kind of a range they are showing up with.
Okay.
So that's going to be like, usually I always say that look at the data. Like usually it takes a small amount of time. Like in sit and goes, it's in a way it's going to be hard because situations are going to be so different because of ICM. But I think like something, if we are thinking about what does a general opponent min raise when other players are like 8 big blinds deep effectively, then it's going to be That's actually something that we could look, and that's probably not something that ICM would screw up that much.
Mhm.
Oh crap. Danita has had a hand analysis hand versus my min race. I think that must be pretty, or that that can't be pretty. That's probably the hand that I was thinking about as well. If you are having pocket force there, then I know that what hand it is. Oh well. Do you have more questions about this, or shall we go on a bit? And that's what Caleon says on the effective stack size to below 8 big blinds and raise size to 2 big blinds, and spots should come up. And like I think that in Hold'em Manager you can also then add a filter on like only where you saw opponent's cards, because then you can look through the list, and you can look through the list like what kind of a hands do my opponent show up, and like arrange the amount of, or like arrange it by the hand, and then start looking like, do I have a lot of crap here, or do I have only a lot of premiums?
Okay, I will do that.
And actually for Danita, that's actually a hand that it's easy to go to hand analysis, because that's actually the hand also that I should take a look at, that I remember. That's one of the hands that I marked for the session. So that's also a good point. Actually, that's, if someone can find the hand that Danita has said, that post a link to it on the chat, and go take a look and think about the ranges for both players. I think that's quite an interesting hand, because there are plenty. I think we are the two biggest stacks on the table, and there is, I think, at least one small stack, if I remember it correctly. And then the next question is about c-betting strategy. But there are some spots where I still don't know if I c-bet correctly. Some situations are, for example, if I raise UTG with pocket jacks and flop comes ace deuce deuce, and it's a double suited flop, so there will be a flush draw possibility. It just seems to be a perfect c-bet spot, and if I don't c-bet, I open myself up to get bluffed out of the hand. And even bad players seem often be able to bet multiple streets, and I have to give up after 2 calls here most of the time. Now
Yeah,
I do check there often, but at some point, like pocket nines, I just prefer to c-bet this.
yeah, and I think the problem with the jack is that I kind of play my hand face up. I'm basically saying I don't have an ace, so.
I don't think that you are saying that you don't have an ace.
Well,
I think that going for a check call with something like also going with check call with ace X hands as well makes sense in a way. Especially if your opponents are in position and are really aggressive post flop. But I think that the point there is that what's going to be the cutoff on such a flop? Like, what's going to be the worst hand that we would like to turn into a bluff? And I think that the question in here is that what's the worst hand or what's the worst pocket pair that we rather want to turn into a bluff, because when showdown comes, we are unlikely to have the best hand anymore. Like, I think pocket jacks is going to be quite a good example on a spot. I think that we are out of position, because in position I don't think that this makes a lot of sense to think. So I'm going to think that we are out of position in this random example. But I think like with pocket jacks, it's going to be that I think that calling for 2 streets, and if opponent goes for 3 streets and he's a random player, I think that they are going to have it. That they are going to have the ace too often. But check folding is going to be way too weak.
Yeah.
So that's out of the question, at least on the flop, I think. And I think something like pocket fives or pocket sixes would be probably the start of the hand that I would like to turn into a bluff rather than. Because if we are thinking about pocket fives or pocket sixes, it's going to be something like 60 or 70% likelihood that both of the cards, at least 50% plus, that both cards that are coming are going to be bigger than the five or six. So they are going to have way less. They are going to have way less good spots, and I think something like pocket fives, pocket sixes would be where I would start to rather turn it into a bluff. And if we are having jacks and like the flush draw comes through, but we are having the jack of the suit that comes up, I still think that it's going to be a good spot to carry on, because then we are having some more opportunities. Do you have a question, Sor?
No, that was well explained. Maybe one question about position. You said that this doesn't make sense when we are in position. This question.
I don't think that it makes that much sense, because it's going to be way less likely that opponents are going to pressure us, especially since if we are getting a c-bet opportunity. Like pocket jacks, I think that if we are in position, it's going to be a pot control opportunity. But also it's going to be even easier to turn the weakest pocket pairs into a bluff, especially since opponents, when we are in position, opponents are going to fold way more often than if they are in position.
Okay.
And that's pretty much, I think Caleon hit the nail on the head. Like I personally take a decent amount of check call line with weaker part of ace x range if we are open raising early and a dry ace xx flop comes. It's tough to get value by c-betting, and we are also protecting our pocket pairs range that we might want to check call as well. I think that's really well explained by Caleon. And like something like if we are having suited ace there, like we are opening something like ace 8 suited, which is a really reasonable open from UTG, then I think that it's going to be a hand that will play quite well by check calling. And something like ace king off, it's just going to be so good that it's going to be the cornerstone of our polarized range most of the time to bet for value there. But I don't think that like with ace deuce board, that I don't think that the situation should be that we should like never have an ace there, because it would make sense for us to have some aces with our check call line as well.
Okay.
And in a way, this is going to probably it's going to be a bit of a harder situation, especially out of position, because then what our c-bet range consists of, it will also affect what kind of a hand can our check call and check fold and check raise ranges consist of. So there are a lot more of balls in the air, I'd say, and it's going to be a lot more complicated situation out of position than in position. Because like in position, it's like what we see bet and what we check back, and then there is going to be like, then we are already seeing the turn. Okay.
Okay.
And it's like those c-bet situations are especially out of position because the c-bet also affects our other ranges. Like how if we are c-betting every strong hand, then when we check, we are pretty exploitable because then we don't have any strong hands to check call with. So it's going to be a problematic situation, and it's something that you'll need to really think about and think about the whole ranges that come, and how do you play your whole range the best way possible against your opponent's range or ranges. And so again, another point is balance is meaningful or not. Yep, it's like usually in tournament poker we'll want to do the greatest equity option and not care that much about balance because we don't get to play against other opponents that much. But like in 9-max sit and goes, I think that we are going to, like, you are going to see these guys like NXP Ninja, and you are going to get bored by those guys after a while because you are going to see those guys so often. Okay, there's another question that if I raise UTG and get called by a reg who is in position and has to act first post-flop, never sure how much I can c-bet there and what boards are better or worse. Like if I raise Jack 10 suited and board is Ace XX or King XX or Ace 9-8 or whatever, is that a good c-bet versus his range?
Mm-hmm.
Holy Batman. That's a wide-ranged question. And the problem in here is that we are having like a situation that we are just like thought that we are out of position. And like when it's a good bet against the regs range, especially since regs are going to be the players that are adjusting the most and are having the most distinct or the most different looking hand ranges. Like if we are having a fishy player, it's going to be quite probable that his range of calling the UTG raise is going to be fairly similar to his range calling a button range or button raise.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are looking at a reg, like if we are UTG and raise, or if let's say that reg is on the button, the range that he's going to call a UTG raise are going to be wildly different from a raise that he's going to call a cutoff raise.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I'm going to take the like one poker coach card that says it depends. I need to draw a card that I can hold like it depends card here because it would be awesome. So it's like Jack 10 suited that is it a good c-bet versus his range? It depends on what is your opponent's range. Like something like Ace 9-8, it's usually going to be a board that if we c-bet we are going for broke since we are going to have enough equity in most situations. And if we can't go for broke, then we should opt for not c-betting at that spot because then we would lose equity by folding a lot of equity against our opponent. Like if our opponent can inflict a lot of ICM pressure, then we should take it into account and c-bet less with hands that are going to have. But in general, something like Jack 10 suited, let's say that board is like Ace XX and it's going to be let's say that board is ace XX and we don't have a hit in it, we don't have anything. Like, even though we have jack 10 suited, we are having jack shit.
Yeah.
In those situations, it makes a lot of sense in c-betting a polarized range, and then jack 10 suited would be in the bottom end of the polarized range. Like if we are having ace XX, the range that we are having is going to be like if we are having a dry ace XX board and we are having like no redeeming qualities, then it's going to be quite an easy spot to turn it into a bluff. I don't know. Can I have a thought tool here? Like, we could take about a little bit of a thought exercise here. We could go for Pro Poker Tools, and this is pretty much the best spot to go through something like, let's say that we are having ace of hearts, 9, not even 9, it hits way too well with our 8 of diamonds, and let's say deuce of clubs. Our hand is jack of, let's say jack of hearts and 10 of hearts. And let's say that we are opening from, let's say, cutoff, and our opponent is calling us with from the button, so range would be something like, let's say he's likely going to 3-bet with the best part of his range, so something like 5 to 25%. And graph hand versus range. And this should be the syntax of going for, like, we are excluding the best hands from our opponent's range. And in here we are, actually this is something like we could simulate, this is actually better. Like in here we are seeing that our hand is having pretty bad equity here. And even if we are thinking about turns, like I said, that we are having quite a few redeeming qualities. I think like at 12% of the time we are hitting either a 9 or probably we are hitting jack or a 10. But like our equity in this spot is going to be so weak that this is going to be a board that we likely want to turn our hand into a bluff and c-bet because it's a bluff. And if it's like, if this is a 9 of clubs, and then let's simulate again, when our equity is so much better, then there will be, like, it's not great equity, but it's going to be enough equity that if we have sizable amount of chips already in, like if we are less than 20 big blinds deep, it's going to be that we can go for broke if there is no major ICM implications most of the time. But also, like, should we then go for a check call line still and go for a pot control line? But with this kind of equity, it makes a lot more sense to go for a check call line than this kind of equity, especially when the equity comes this way, that when we are hitting a straight, we are having a really great equity. When we are hitting a pair, we are having okay equity, and with other cards we know that we are screwed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like if we are taking our board away and graphing hand versus range for jack 10 suited, actually I should have asked for the equity first, but this is something that I find that we are having, that this is a really useful tool. Like if we are thinking about the ace 8 deuce board, we are having 23% of equity. So it's going to be like in the worst 85% for our hand. And our hand is probably going to, if we are going to rank it, it's going to be, actually, this didn't work in a way that I wanted it to work. So if we are thinking about it here, like this flop is going to be one of the worst flops for us. So and our equity is going to be so low that it makes a lot of sense to turn it into a bluff. And also, if we are thinking about some kind of a different, let's say that we are having like Jack 8-9, it doesn't matter. Like if we are having some flop like Jack 8-9, that's a great hand, great board for our hand. And this is a equity spot that we want to bet for value, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And basically, and this is even when we are having 67% equity, it's like it's only top 15% flop for us. So like we could do better, but this is what I'm doing when I'm thinking like should I be c-betting or not. Then I'm going to take a look at the equities. Then I'm going to also take a look at the turn equities, like how does my equity present itself? Like this is going to be way more valuable equity for me on the turn. So I would like to see a turn more when there are like almost surefire situations for me. Than if the situation is that even on the turn, even if I hit really well, I can't get more than 50%. We lost Germany again.
No, I'm still here. Yes, I got it.
But this is something that I think that would be probably quite useful for you to play with as well, and think about the equities in different situations. And like then bet with equities and think like, what would be a good polarized range to turn into a bluff here? What would be a value hand? What are the hands that would benefit a lot of seeing another card and have too much equity for us to want to fold it, or then just have too little equity for us to go for broke with it? And like those hands are hands that you probably don't want to see bet. And sorry about this. I know that this isn't an easy answer, but when the question is so wide, I think this is the best I can do to show you some tools on how to approach it.
Yeah, sorry for the vague question. But one question I have here is, since we established that our hand is not very good or doesn't have that much equity versus his range, how bad does our hand have to be so that it's not a good idea to turn it into a bluff? I mean, you mentioned that we should turn Jack 10 into a bluff on this ace high board because we don't have much future equity on turn.
It's then we come into a second set of problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say that we are against an opponent on this board. Let's say that we are having a weak reg that doesn't like playing. Let's say that he's really needy and he doesn't like playing except with a really good hand.
Mm-hmm.
What would our bluff range look like then?
Well, I mean, if his range is really strong, then I don't think that we have a big bluffing range there or a lot of success against a tight range, I would think. I mean,
if we are against the needier player and needs like to also knit in the post-flop situations, and if we would have an opponent that would really like to have a good hand, then in those spots, I'm thinking that like we would then want to like turn, we would likely want to turn every weak equity hand into a bluff. But if our opponent is an opponent that will call a lot, then we wouldn't want to turn like now I wonder like how do I want to explain this? Let's say that we are c-betting. What hands we are c-betting for value? Like great equity hands. Then so the middling equity hands, medium equity hands, we probably want to check. Let's say that this is the value O-meter. And this goes from great equity hands to medium equity hands to crappy equity hands. And like basic theorem would be that this bet for value, because value is always nice. I want to be a major of value town. So then there will be crappy equity hands.
Which we also want to bet, I guess.
Bet as a bluff. But then there will be a problem, like if we are against a player that folds a lot post-flop. But if we are against a player that doesn't fold a lot post-flop, then it's going to be pretty much like if we are against a player that doesn't fold a lot, like let's say that let's add then the medium great equity hands. So when we are having an opponent that doesn't like to fold a lot post-flop, then some of our medium equity hands that are like having a pretty good equity are going to be bets as well, because our opponent doesn't like folding. Then we are going to have more value out of even weaker hands. But then we are also going to have like so we can also split like the bottom of our graph, like there are going to be medium crappy equity hands. And like we want some playability and outs. And so then we are doing some kind of a cutoff somewhere around here, like against a guy that doesn't like to fold a lot post-flop. We can't bet our whole range, except the hands that would play better without betting. So then we are going to have some kind of a cutoff that what we want to bet. Like then we are only bluffing with our with hands that are having some hope. And the crappiest of the crap, we can then just check fold aggressively. And that's a pun, check folding aggressively, because that's usually something that you don't do aggressively. And I shouldn't be making fun of these jokes because people are going to take me seriously here, and then I'm going to hear about these aggressive check folds.
Yeah, he called Queen 10 honey.
But this is what it looks. So then we are going to just bluff some part of our hand, and then it's going to be like the medium crappy, like hands that are having some kind of playability, some kind of outs. And like I have kept myself from looking the chat because I know that Calleon, and right now like I'm feeling that I probably didn't do that good of a job explaining this. And like the more opponents want to call, the more we are expanding our value range, and the smaller our medium range gets. And also like then it might be that we might even like our crappy equity range might be completely zero, that we don't like bluff anything. If our opponent doesn't like folding, then we might only play for value. So it doesn't always mean that we are having all these ranges, but this is like a basic theorem of how I like to think and how I like to approach the hands.
Okay. And do you look at all post-flop into GTO strategies?
They are going to be, in a way, they are going to be slightly harder for sit and goes, especially since we are having ICM effects. But I have looked a bit of those as well, and I just think that there's going to be a problem in a way that most sit and go players are going to be quite far away from GTO, and on most players you can find something to exploit. So I think that with us sit and go players, I think that especially outside heads up sit and goes, I think that we are still quite far away from GTO.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that Calleon has put some really good points in like also having three barrels with ace 9-8 with jack 10. Like that's going to be a really good hand to have as a three barrel bluff. And in general, like you don't want to have a lot of three barrel bluffs in a way, because in general I think that people are going to show up if you three barrel. Like if they have already called two barrels, they are going to be quite likely that they are having a good hand already. And Calleon says that have not been using this tool, pretty close to Flopzilla from functions. I think Flopzilla is likely it's going to be easier to use. This is like an engineer focused, and there's pretty much nothing that you can't do with PQL. And there's Kartsah that says that finishing his accent is strong in this one. Yeah, at least now I'm not thought about as Russian, so that's okay for me. I have seen some Putin jokes as well about my accent, so I don't know if it's more Finnish or whatever. And Neo is not Finnish, so
yeah,
he just thinks like a Finn, but he's like a Finn that has been lost in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Caleon said, if tight villain falls all hands outside of big ace-x on this dry ace-x's board, then one stab and let go will be okay with a lot of air. Yeah, like, and also, if he calls with, like, only with aces and really good pocket pairs, I still think that we can c-bet with almost, or we can c-bet with all of our air. Like, only when guy is also floating us sometimes with good equity hands are still going to be like not ace x hands, because he shouldn't have enough. Like if he's having ace x is like he's still hitting the board with less than 1 in 3. So if he's only with his hits and with his pocket pairs, it's still going to be like 25 to 30% of his range. And we should be printing money by c-betting even our weakest hands against such a player. And thinking early open raise situation where reg calls from positions we will not face in general that much raises on our c-bets. Yeah, like if we are opening from early position and flop comes with an ace, a reg is not going to raise our c-bet that often. Even if he's having great ace himself or two pair or something, I don't think that reg will be raising, because then he will expect you to be c-betting and he will expect that he'll get more out of you if he just calls. Oh crap! This is still we are in the first page of Neo's questions. C-betting in general on boards that are kind of semi-wet, like having ace queen and board comes 9-8-4, with or without flush or 10-8-3, or having pocket trips and board is queen jack 7, again with or without flush. Basically the top two cards being close together and me having not total trash. Also wondering if having trash and no showdown value changes anything here. Well, it changes. Like, in general, you'll always be happier when you are having outs or when you are having trash. Like, this is from our quick explanation, like, something like ace queen will be even on boards that it doesn't hit very well. It's at least medium crappy. But something like four deuce off, it can have spots that it's really crappy and has no redeeming qualities.
Mhm.
So I think this is going to be quite close. Like, it's going to be an equity question. What kind of equities do you get? What happens with your... Like, then if we are saying that we are having like 30% range that we are opening, we are against the bottom, kind of a bottom call range. So if we are crafting hand versus hand on flops, then like what kind of flops we are getting? Do I get the right kind of a graph here? Perhaps not. I don't get the kind of a graph that I'm thinking about. But it's basically about that we are thinking about what kind of equity do we have. Then we are thinking about the board, and then we are thinking of like what are we expecting, then what kind of a range we are going to have here. Do we want to see bet, do we not want to see bet, and building from there. But it's a really wide question,
Okay.
and it's more like going to be a tool question because it's so wide. Then there is a book question. I haven't read the book. I can't recommend it. I haven't heard anything about it, so can't recommend it. Usually, I have talked about this about Neo, that usually like players in sit and goes can have leagues that you can like push a truck through, or a small elephant can find his way through those leagues, and they can have like huge pre-flop leagues in situations that happen like 2 or 3 times almost every game. But usually people don't want to discuss about those, but they are wanting to discuss more about the post-flop situation that happens once in 30 tournaments, and the equity difference is likely going to be way smaller. So I think that you need to be quite good at sit and goes before you should use a lot of focus in improving, or just concentrating on improving post-flop poker.
Okay.
Then there's like point on post-flop aggression, that in general I think I'm not aggressive enough post-flop. Well, it's like, what can I say? If you think that you are not aggressive enough post-flop, there are going to be 3 buttons, and if you are selecting the rightmost button more often, it's like with the car. If you are selecting the rightmost pedal more often, you are going to go faster. So it's like, if you don't feel that you are aggressive enough, then select the rightmost button more often. That's, in a way, that's also quite hard to. We could take a small peek in your C betting stats here. Yeah, like if we are focusing on a hero, then adding a point that player is not hero is not going to give us a lot of stuff to go through. Let's see. There's flop. Let's add this with pre-flop stack size. Like c-betting flop against about 65%. I think that you are going to be about average in the games with that. I think that there is point, because people are, in general, they're going to fold too much. So we can actually check it. Like we can use the all players report. And then we should have something like c-bet here, or bet flop. Let's wait for a while. And let's arrange by the amount of hands here. So c-bet flop, like 65%, and the average is 66%. So you are likely that you are a bit less aggressive than average, but as I said, about average.
Okay.
So, and with something like check raising, you are going to be way less active than, and probably it's like fold to flop bet. You are going to be folding a lot more against a flop bet than a general player. So, but that's not both of aggression. That's, or like floating enough might be. And there is like also, you don't want to be the player that folds the least in post flop, because in these reports we are having all the players in here. And when we are having all the players, we are also having the fishy players that are losing a lot of equity because they are never, or they are not folding enough. So in a way, we can look at averages, but we shouldn't look at averages on how we should play. Like, we should more look at the averages, like what are our opportunities to play against the other players. And even when opponents are folding against a flop bet with 56% of time, that makes it quite enticing to also bet a lot on the flop.
Mhm. Okay.
Oh wow. I'm like a deer in headlights right now. I have looked through this before, but I thought that we could go through these, but damn that these are wide questions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Nah, I'd say that I could answer most of these that post hands to our hand analysis forums, and let's go through there with some real example hands. Because it's like playing draws correctly. It's like never sure when to bet re-raise, shove, or just call. But it's next time that I'm holding a public-private coaching, I'm going to have the "It Depends" card that I can raise at all the possible spots. Also, best response to small and min bets post flop, and it's also when you are thinking about min bets post flop, you're always thinking about what kind of a range they are doing it. If I'm having great equity against their range, I probably should want to raise it, especially if I'm thinking that they are going to call my raise. If I'm not having great equity, then it's like if I'm having good outs, if I'm having implied odds, and against players that are min betting a lot, usually you are having implied odds. So usually it makes sense to call with your draws, and if you hit on the turn or river, then bet against those guys, because usually the same guys that are going to min bet a lot, usually the same guys are also guys that are paying you off a bit too widely.
Mhm.
Then there's like improving multi-tabling, making faster decisions and less mistakes. Yeah, that's improving multi-tabling. That if you make faster decisions and less mistakes, then you have improved multi-tabling. But when you are at certain level, it will be really hard to improve multi-tabling. And one thing that I'd add here, like if you are improving your multi-tabling, you should like practice it. This is stuff that sounds really stupid, but it's not rocket science. It's something that if you want to be a better multi-tabler, then you'll need to focus on your multi-tabling phase of your game. Like, if you want to be a better multi-tabler, then you'll need to just train for multi-tabling. Like, play some sessions where you are going to concentrate on improving multi-tabling. Like, open up $0.5 sit and goes. Open 25 of those if you now can play 18 tables. Play through the 25 tables or 22 or something. And like, you should stress less about money then, but you should still have like experience and trying to push your limits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And on some days I can play 18 without problems. On other days I time out with 8 tables, so it's not very consistent. Well, that's also something that if I would know a good answer to that, like on a good day, I can probably do 25 hypers pretty well. On a bad day, I can time out with 16-18. It's also something that when you play a lot with the same amount of tables, you are getting less spots where you are going to time out. So practice.
Okay.
And there will always be spots that, like if you are playing, let's say if you are playing 16 tables, there will always be the freaky set that, like if I'm having a set that I'm timing out, it usually means that I'm going deep in multiple games at the same time. And I know myself, like if I'm having 8 heads ups going on at the same time, I'm going to have a hard time. But I'm loving it because I know that I'm making money. So and yeah, while multitabling, it's also hard when you are facing few hard decisions. I think it's also like you should have a light version of your strategy that like you should have the A game that you are taking everything into account, and then you should have a quick B game. Like, and with B game, I mean that you should have like a simplified game. That if you know that you are having a really quick time, like you used up too much of your time doing something, then like now you know that you are having 10 tables waiting for your action. You should have a simplified strategy that you are utilizing on those times to get you back to the comfortable clicking, chugging away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Actually, good addition from Caleon on that. And like for me, it's that when I'm having a really quick situation, then I'm going to shove more even with deeper stacks, like go more for shove or fold type of situations. And probably I'm going to also fold more on those situations because it's usually a situation that if I'm folding, I'm usually making a smaller. If I'm folding a bit too much, like if I get raised against, usually I make less mistakes than if I call too much. So especially if I'm really in a hurry.
Okay.
Mm, mental game problems.
Yeah.
Well, this is a time I can recommend a book. Mental Game of Poker 1 and
Uh,
2.
I have the audiobook version.
Uh, I don't think that it matters if it's audiobook or not. It's actually one of the books that lends itself very well to an audiobook format. Most poker books are horrible in audiobooks. I just like if there is a mathematical example and there is an audiobook, always in the middle of the example I'm probably I have already lost the train of thought.
Yeah, I think I listened to this book like for 2 times now. But yeah, I
But
still feel bad on some days.
but it's something that you said in here, like if you are making a mistake, then you are making more mistakes later on because you are feeling bad for the first mistake. One thing that sounds stupid, but I think that works, that if you have made a mistake and you know that you are playing bad because of that, is to take deep breaths. It will calm you down. And it's not the worst thing if you get slightly tilted, if you just can recover quickly from that. But if it's always wrecks your session that after you are making mistakes, then you are making more mistakes and it's a death spiral for your session, then it's a really bad thing.
Mhm.
So it's about creating tools for yourself to recover quickly when your mental game starts to deteriorate.
Okay.
And like breathing deeply usually is something that it sounds that it's bullshit, but At least it works for me. That's what I recommend when you are finding yourself. That's like the first aid when you are finding yourself going into a tilt. And probably the worst thing that you can do is start cursing, throwing stuff, hitting your table, throwing your mouse. All of those things are only going to make your tilt deeper. So, and that's something that if you are making a mistake, if technology doesn't work, usually that makes you feel bad. And there is practically nothing else, or that's like when you have done a lot of mistakes, then it starts feeling less bad after a mistake. But if you are hidden Finn, usually you are having the deep shame, as the Finns do. Like the story goes, when every other nationality goes to a Jew, they are looking like, whoa, that's a gorgeous looking hippo. Wow, like, what's he doing there? And when a Finn goes to a Jew looking for hippos, he's looking there and thinking about, what does that hippo think about me? So it's like, don't be so hard on yourself. Everybody makes mistakes, and then it's more about like thinking about ways to get back at your as good game as you can get as quickly as possible. Like if you want to play a big volume, you'll need ways to keep carry on with your sets, even when you have done mistakes, even when you are feeling slightly tilted. And there are quite good other tools in the mental game of poker, like holding a diary, trying to improve one step at a time.
Yeah, I also have to agree with Danita. I also listen to music. I think without music, I would play much worse.
Yeah, I
I
think
like
that's
happy music. It keeps me from sinking into total depression on some days.
yeah, that's something that I think that can help if you are listening to music. It can probably like there has been research on like if you are listening to something like aggressive heavy metal while you are driving, you are likely driving more aggressively and you are likely driving quicker. And on the other hand, if you are listening something soothing, you are likely driving more calmly.
Mhm.
So it's going to be about I think with poker it's going to be about the same. Like if you are feeling like you are going to or you are having a day that you are not aggressive enough on the tables, then you should break out your more aggressive music. Get some fighting heavy metal in there
Mhm.
and go for maximum attack. And also the other way around, that if you are feeling that you are too aggressive and you are doing too many mistakes on being too aggressive, then it's like go for some instrumental music, some slower music to calm you down.
Mhm.
And Danita says that, yeah, don't listen to death metal while playing poker. I think that at least in the games that I played, there might be some players that are playing so needy that they would benefit listening to some Norwegian troll metal and starting to get a lot more aggressive. You sounded like Darth Vader a bit there.
I did.
Yeah, there was a long inhale or something like. Probably some mistake or something with Skype, but sounded.
I was quiet. It was Skype.
But I think that right now it's time to end. You got at least your extra 10 minutes when we're thinking about the UTG stuff.
Yeah, 10 minutes and an hour extra.
Yes, so it's probably. And I think that there were a lot of like, this is probably a bit more. There's probably a bit more advanced session than we had last times around. So there are a lot of more advanced stuff in this session.
Mm-hmm.
So. I think.
And thanks very much for the coaching. Thank you.
And I'd say that thanks very much for our chat as well. There have been quite a lot of activity and quite a lot of good comments. I'd especially need to thank Kaleon and Danita for some really good comments up there. And what should I say here? This Sunday we won't have a Sunday poker night, but I think this week Kaleon will do an English poker night on 6 max games. I think so.
Tomorrow.
It's going to be tomorrow. So it's going to be tomorrow. Is it going to be on Tuesday or Wednesday? Tuesday. So tomorrow you'll hear some Kaleon in English. I'd say you should tune up. I think this has been quite a good 3 days for tournament poker. We had quite a nice session yesterday on 50-50s, today on 9-max pokers, and the power carries on when Kaleon tries to conquer the 6-max games. And thanks everyone. If you are going to sleep, have a good night. If you are still playing poker, may this be a winning night for you. Bye!